Daniel Horowitz joins me from the Madison Project. Always great to have him back in South Georgia. Daniel, you got to be one of the most busiest guys on earth these days.
Yes, but you know what, Bill? It's for good reason. A lot of good primary challengers here, and good candidates, and that's what we like.
Well, you're making a lot of noise with the latest Paul Broun endorsement. Why does Paul Broun stand out for you guys at the Madison Project?
Paul Broun is really, probably in some respects, the most unique candidate this cycle. We're always looking for the newest and latest stars. Everyone's obviously into Mike Lee and Ted Cruz, and for good reason. But we're always kind of looking for new, fresh blood, new names. The next, new challenger we have this year, Matt Bevin in Kentucky and Milton Wolf in Kansas. Kind of new, exciting names. But sometimes the best, most committed, most proven conservative fighter is right under our noses. And that's what you guys got there in Georgia with Paul Broun.
And he's got an impressive resume, too, when you look at his bio. And it seems like there's a lot of people going into politics for Congress and the Senate that are past doctors and are past military people. And it looks like, that's definitely true about Paul Brown's resume.
Absolutely. Paul has both of those. People know him, obviously, from his time in Congress. They know he's very conservative. But the truth is, I myself, before I really started looking into him, I didn't realize how impressive he was. In addition to being a doctor for many, many years, he's been in the military, Navy Reserves. He was first in the Marines and then the Navy Reserves for many decades. And this was, I don't know if this is true of any other member of Congress, but as a sitting member during the August recess in 2012, and look, Paul's got to be well into his 60s by then. He was deployed to Afghanistan, and he was serving, in a combat theater as a medic.
That's crazy at that age.
Absolutely. So that's the thing. I mean, he really is very impressive. He's a soldier, he's a doctor, and he's just a constitutional warrior. And part of the problem we have, and look, we've discussed this before. You elect a bunch of good guys, but they get thrown into kind of that meat grinder where there's a certain operation in Washington. This is the way business is done. This is the way the party establishment is. And there's very few people, even the most well-intentioned candidates, who go up there to shake up Washington, but they become changed by the culture. I mean, Paul Brown's the type of guy to be, kind of like those Japanese fighters who were caught fighting on some of those Pacific islands well into the 1960s. I mean, he's gonna be fighting for us forever. He's been there for 7 years, and that's a long time to get taken in by the pay-for-play game in Washington. And he has basically maintained a perfect voting record. I don't think of all 435 members there's anyone you could say that about. There's a couple other new guys that are okay, and some new guys that are really good stars, but nobody has maintained that for 7 full years. And I think the other important thing about Paul Broun, Bill, is even some of the best members, they need their hands held. You got to follow up with them, and, we kind of get a stomach ache, and we're nervous in the couple of weeks and days before a certain vote. Are they going to fold? They waver on us. Paul Broun never needs that. He always knows, what the right thing to do is, and like he always says, he carries around a Constitution and the Bible, and that is his guidepost.
It's one thing to have a voting record that's going to look good on a scorecard, but I think when you look at Paul Broun, his philosophy is very attractive to a lot of different voters, and especially the liberty-minded folks in the Republican Party and libertarians. And I think the fact that Ron Paul has come out and endorsed him too says a lot about his philosophy.
Absolutely. One of the problems we actually have this cycle, and it kind of speaks to why we're so enthusiastically supporting Paul, is that many members are they're divisive within that three-legged stool. Some are really good libertarians. They're good on the fiscal issues. They don't care too much about social conservatism. And, vice versa, there are plenty of guys that are kind of establishment Republicans. They'll say they're pro-life, pro-traditional marriage, and they're really big government guys like we kind of call pro-life statists. That's the nickname for those that will just wave the flag on pro-life, but then they vote for all the big spending. Paul Broun is that guy who's the perfect fiscal and social conservative, and he's introduced a lot of legislation on both ends. He has the best gun right to carry reciprocity bill. He has the best health care reform bill. So he's not just kind of this bomb thrower, a flamethrower who's just good at block and tackle and voting no. He actually has a lot of very good legislation out there that he's sponsored. So he really knows how to articulate all the issues that are important to all ends of the conservative spectrum, and that's really the most uniting aspect of Paul Broun, the way he could unite the Ron Paul libertarians and the Christian conservatives.
One of the things that the media around here in Georgia, especially out of Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and other different left-wing media sources, they're really giving Paul Broun a hard time of past things that he said about his faith. You mentioned that he carries around a Bible and the Constitution and things that he said about evolution. He's very bold about his faith, but, the other part of it, we're here in Georgia. This is still the Bible Belt, no matter how you want to slice it. And the fact is, the majority of Georgia voters don't have a problem with him taking shots at the evolutionists out there and standing up for what he believes in regard to what the Bible has to say and what his faith dictates to him.
Well, we see the same thing in the D.C. media. It's kind of cute watching them project their own views on conservative parts of the country. And we find this all the time. Well, this guy can never get elected. Well, he thinks marriage is between a man and a woman. I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, these people are really out of touch with most voters in the heartland or in the South, and that's the thing. This notion that Paul Broun is somehow a liability and some of these other candidates are more electable. There's no evidence to bear that out. And if anything, Paul Broun has the most passionate base of support. He's run the most disciplined, effective campaign so far with the money he has. And at this point, he's really the best bet, even from an electability standpoint.
When you talk about the media ganging up on him, it seems like he's gone through the ringer and he's gone through the fire before, and he's proved everybody wrong. If you can give us some examples of what the media like to call him as the accidental congressman. They don't understand why he won. He voted on a fluke, and then he just blows the other candidates out of the water, and he wins re-election after re-election. Give us a brief history of the run that Paul Broun has had since he's entered Washington, D.C.
Sure. So in 2007, former Congressman Charlie Norwood passed away, and that was obviously in the middle of the term. So there was a special election middle of the year, and there were a bunch of candidates, like any other conservative district with an open field. Everyone wants to run in such a good district for the Republican Party, and lo and behold, a guy who was never elected before beat out a state senator. I mean, first he made it to the runoff when no one thought he'd make it there, and then certainly when he was in the runoff, the one who led after the first ballot. He won it by kind of almost 2-1. Paul Broun barely made it into the runoff, but he shocked everyone. And they woke up on election day. Paul Broun was congressman-elect. Well, they figured, hey, that's a fluke. That's a special election, funny turnout model. He'll be gone after November. So they had, the Republican Senate Majority Leader, I believe, ran against him, and he got crushed 72-28. I mean, it wasn't even close. Paul Broun really dispatched him, and we've seen this in every re-election. He wins with a stronger level of support. He carries pretty much every corner of the district. It's because people view in him a degree of authenticity they don't see in any other candidate. He has been consistent for 7 years. Everyone knows he says what he means what he says. He's that rare elected official that just never goes sour on you. And the people see that in the district. And I believe once people know more about him statewide, especially in South Georgia, they'll love him just as much.
And he almost seems immune from media attacks because he's been through the ringer before. They've tried to take him down a couple of notches, and they've been unsuccessful. The big question is, how is this time going to be any different?
The only way this could be different is if Republicans the establishment Republicans, both in Washington and Atlanta, try to work behind the scenes to sandbag it, meaning not just stand on the sidelines and opine, well, I don't think he could win a general election, if they actually try to affect that outcome and try to affect that desired result and achieve that result, because many of them view him as a bigger threat than Michelle Nunn. I mean, let's face it. To the establishment Republicans, Michelle Nunn is just one more Democrat seat. Paul Broun will overturn the entire GOP conference there, like he's done in the House, and certainly in the Senate he'd have a louder voice. You know, a move from Saxby Chambliss to Paul Broun is just as sharp as a move from a Democrat to a Republican.
Especially in the South here, that's for sure. Before I let you go here, Daniel, when we're wrapping this interview up here, could you compare Paul Broun to the other candidates, and why why do you guys at Madison Project support him over the other candidates, and why have you chosen him with the rest of the field over him versus the rest of the field?
Sure. So even before and without going into other names, when you have a man like Paul Broun running, there's nowhere else to look. There's no reason to look anywhere else. It's look, we have this with many other candidates where we're very confident in them. We know where they're coming from. We know their beliefs. But at the end of the day, if you've never served in Washington, it's kind of rolling the dice. I mean, we've seen it many, many times. Even the best members kind of go south on us. And again, it's not because they have bad intentions. It's very hard to go up there and change the status quo. So when we're looking at candidates, well, we ask two questions. Are we happy with the status quo in the Republican Party? And B, which candidate is going to go up there to completely overturn it and change it? Which candidate is going to kind of become part of it? Which candidate might be somewhere in the middle, but they're certainly not going to fight the status quo. Paul Broun has literally done that for 7 years in the House, and the House is the most similar body to the Senate. What I'm saying is that, as opposed to coming from a state office, a state legislative office, where things are kind of very different, you don't really have a full sense of how they're going to be in Washington. We know exactly how he'll be, and on a scale from 1 to 10, he's been a 10. So there's no reason to kind of roll the dice on someone else. But, I mean, if you look, Phil Gingrey has really just followed Paul Brown's lead on most issues. And recently, obviously, he's gotten more conservative because he has to keep up with Paul Broun, but he hasn't been as reliable in the past. And frankly, with the establishment talking about, well, Paul Broun is risky, he might be the next Todd Akin. Well, Phil Gingrey literally echoed Todd Akin's comments. He said he agreed with them. So, with a guy like Gingrey, you're getting, any complaint you might have against Paul Broun, well, you're going to get volatile comments from him much more, and you don't have the consistent record that he has. Kingston from South Georgia, I mean, he's been a big spender. He's been an appropriator. He is part and parcel of the Chamber of Commerce GOP establishment. So we have a record on him. Obviously, David Perdue and Karen Handel are the two somewhat newer candidates because they don't have a record in Washington. But, David Perdue, I don't even think he thinks it's a pejorative to say he's part of the establishment. He literally is part of the establishment. And with Karen Handel, there's no evidence that she is strong on the issues in the way we need, and that she has this desire to go up to Washington and completely, tell John Cornyn and Mitch McConnell and GOP leadership to tell them to go shove it.
Nicely put.
I don't even think she would say that. I mean, she might be better than Saxby Chambliss. Again, it's hard to yet to be determined. I mean, when you're Secretary of State, it's not such a partisan office, so she doesn't have that much of a record to know either way. But more importantly, when you compare anyone else, not to put anyone else down, but when you compare them to Paul Broun, what he's done, you're not going to find better than that.
Daniel Horowitz from the Madison Project, you guys were the first out of the gate to support Ted Cruz and other candidates that have gone on to victory. And it seems like you guys are always the first one to endorse, and then you see other groups following it. We'll see how that plays out if the Senate Conservatives Fund will follow you guys and follow your footstep, Club for Growth and other organizations. We'll just have to wait and see how that all plays out. Absolutely, and we hope everyone else comes in and follows behind the charge of Paul Broun. He's just a leader, and he deserves the support of all the groups. Daniel Horowitz from the Madison Project, thank you so much for stopping by. Sure thing.